This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy. Just drop in some details about yourself and see if you're eligible to save money when you bundle your home and auto policies. The process only takes minutes, and it could mean hundreds more in your pocket. Visit Progressive.com after this episode to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
Hello, and welcome to Around the Political World with John Rothman. I am your host, John Rothman. If you're a fan of the show, make sure to hit the follow button on the top right of Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you are listening at this very moment. When you hit follow, leave a review or share an episode with a friend. It helps other people discover the show, keeps us going. As I like to point out each and every day, it expands our base. Tomorrow is July 4th. That means that today is the opportunity that I have to talk with you about the meaning of America on this eve of our 250th birthday. I do so with some relish, and I want to talk with you a little bit about what we're celebrating. America is a great country, and it has great opportunity, great promise. It's just great. We've had our bumps in the road, no question about it, over 250 years, but there are questions that people are asking today about whether or not we can really celebrate this 250 years with all of the joy that we have always celebrated our nation's birthday. I go back to 1976, when only a year and a half after Watergate, there was a new breath in America, a feeling of hope. And I believe no matter how sad or depressing or corrupt certain moments may be, we have to be optimistic about America. And I want to begin with some of the issues which I'm deeply concerned about before we join in the celebratory sense of what America is. Let me be clear, what's happening in Fulton County, Georgia, is a violation of every ethic. It is an impeachable offense, and there should be no doubt about it. The Justice Department, at the direction of the White House, has assigned 260 additional Justice Department people to investigate corruption in the 2020 election. Donald Trump is so determined to prove that he in fact won the election of 2020 that he is misusing the government of the United States. That, my friends, is an impeachable offense. And I want to say that very clearly. We have had investigations in Georgia. We have had vote recounts. We've had Republicans and Democrats agree that the voting in Georgia was fair. The governor, the attorney general of Georgia, all have said, they've stipulated, there was no fraud in that election. So the question is, how is it that 260 agents are now being assigned to investigate fraud in Georgia? And the answer is because it is the President of the United States' obsession to prove that the election of 2020 was stolen. My friends, can you imagine what 260 Justice Department officials working properly might accomplish in this country? And yet, at the whim of the President of the United States, the Justice Department, which is now thoroughly corrupted, is assigned this task. It is to me a clear abuse of power. It is to me a clear question that something very wrong is being done. And then, my friends, there is this major story which appeared this morning, that consultants tied to President Donald Trump have been engaged in financial fraud, tricking donors into wanting to support the nation's bipartisan 250th anniversary into sending their money instead to a rival group set up by his administration. And this story is proven, it is clear, it is precise. There is more corruption in this administration than we have ever seen. And then there is the case, which I want to refer to now, of the ex-Olympian who was indicted Thursday on a felony charge in what President Donald Trump has called vandalizing the reflecting pools. David Hearn, a former Olympic canoe racer, has been indicted. And I want to be clear about this. I don't want there to be any ambiguity. He did put both hands into the reflecting pool, and he did pull out some things which were eroded. And there is no doubt that he did not have any tools which he would have used to damage the reflecting pools. By the way, all you have to do is listen to Jean Pirro, the so-called, and I say so-called because she's hardly neutral or objective, official who is now talking about this absurd arrest. Donald Trump's obsessions are becoming a real problem for this country. And the fact that we now have Trump-linked fundraisers accused of fraud, the fact that we now have an ex-Olympian accused of vandalizing the reflecting pools, the fact that we have, as we have pointed out repeatedly, election fraud charges being made by this president, including what is happening now in Fulton County, Georgia. It's not just one issue, do you understand? It's not two issues. It's not three issues. It's multiple abuses of power. July 4th should be a time when we celebrate our country. And I believe it is a time to celebrate and rejoice the freedoms that we have in America. But I also believe very strongly that when you see corruption, when you see abuse of power, when you see a president of the United States who is trying to turn July 4th into a celebration of Donald Trump, well, my friends, we have an obligation to celebrate America and to celebrate the fact that we can criticize a president of the United States and his administration with impunity. I say this regretfully. I say this with a deep sense of sadness. In fact, I will reflect that in all of my years on the radio and all of the political commentary I've done on a variety of locations and spots around this country, never have I seen such a spectacle as Donald Trump's abuses of power. I want you to know that if I were a member of Congress, I would immediately drop into the box an article of impeachment, maybe several articles of impeachment. But the simple fact is, as long as the Republicans control the House of Representatives, and as long as the votes do not exist in the Senate, there will be no articles prepared. There will be no active voice that stands up and says, enough is enough. To me, that is the ultimate tragedy in this country. And on July 4th, when we celebrate America, we must celebrate its greatness, but we must also celebrate the reality of what's going on. The fact that Donald Trump is going to go to Mount Rushmore to begin the celebration of the 4th of July, and no doubt there are still those who say his image should be added to Mount Rushmore. In fact, there is a model that the president has that was produced by a group of people of Mount Rushmore with Trump's picture added. It's absolutely horrific. There is something terribly wrong, and maybe people are reluctant to call it out, but I am not, and I will call it out, no matter what it takes. And I'm going to tell you something else that I think is true. When the history of this period is written, what we have suggested on this podcast will be verified as truth. Now, it's a terrible thing when you are certain that you are right. And it is a terrible thing when you know that the people you're dealing with, the people in government, are wrong. And although history may vindicate our position, it does not give comfort to me that we still must go through what we are going through now. Now, I want to shift to foreign policy for a moment. In Iran today, there is massive mourning for the death of the Grand Ayatollah. We, along with our allies, were responsible for the death of many leaders in the Iranian government, including the supreme leader. They are mourning, and who do you think their anger will be directed against but us? Now, I'm not afraid of their anger, but I am afraid of what Iran may do in the world. It should concern us all that radical Iran has now been radicalized even more by our actions. By the way, I believe our actions are completely defensible, but I think we'd better be prepared for the fact that although Donald Trump speaks of total obliteration and so forth, that in fact Iran is still a viable nation with a viable government. And it is important to note that we are going to be sending them billions of dollars because, according to the president, they're living up to their part of the deal, which you and I know is not true. This, my friends, is a national scandal as well. And again, I raise the question, where is the Congress in all of this? I want to talk now about another foreign policy matter, which should concern us all. I listened yesterday on NPR to an interview with Nikita Khrushchev's granddaughter. That's right. It turns out that Russia is hammering Kiev in an hourly drone and missile attack. It is unbelievable. Thursday morning, at least 21 civilians in the city were injured or killed. And we know that Moscow says that retaliation for Ukrainian strikes on Russian oil facilities is the reason. We know that loud explosions shook the Ukrainian capital, where more than 50,000 people sheltered in subway stations after authorities used air raid sirens in order to alert people for what was happening. We know that these missiles are hitting, and we know that the Russian Defense Ministry said in a statement that the bombardment was in response to Ukraine's recent barrage of long-range strikes, which have caused severe fuel shortages and put pressure on Vladimir Putin. We know that what is happening now in Ukraine is intolerable. Ukraine's frequent attempts to hit Russia have been successful. And of course, this continues a war which Donald Trump said he could end immediately after he became president of the United States. Why am I talking about what's going on in Ukraine? Because in a normal time, it would be the dominant headline around the world. And if you think that it is not a headline, take a look at the European press. Europe understands that what happens in Ukraine affects all of Europe. And this president, who has been continually attacking the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, deserves to hear from us. This is wrong. Now, of course, no matter what we say to Donald Trump, it won't make a difference. But I have raised this question before, and I shall raise it again. Where are the congressional hearings? Where are the type of hearings we had about Vietnam in 1966, nationally broadcast, where everything was revealed? And did we, my friends, did we hit that orphanage? Was it our rocket that did the great damage? Well, according to the Trump administration, they just can't figure it out. We can't even admit when we make an error, and it appears that we were the only party capable of taking that kind of action. And yet, we still refuse to admit what I believe was our error. We can go on and on this morning as we begin the celebration of July 4th. But I just wanted to indicate to you that we are aware, that we know that there is something amiss. And by the way, there may be little we can do about it, but we must try. We must do our best. There's no question about it. These are serious times. And July 4th will be here tomorrow. I am going to celebrate America. You bet I am. By the way, I want to let you all know that I will be emceeing the Golden Gate Park Band at 1 o'clock at the band shell at Golden Gate Park for their grand 4th of July celebration. It's before the fireworks. Should be a beautiful day. Come on out, 1 o'clock tomorrow, the band shell at Golden Gate Park. I'll be happy to greet you, take your comments, and this should be an absolutely marvelous event. It's free, by the way, no cost. So come out to the band shell at Golden Gate Park and enjoy at 1 o'clock, July 4th, this Saturday, what will be a concert of patriotic music. We're going to celebrate America, and that's the way it ought to be. And now it's Friday, and so I have to go to question and answers. I want to thank Gogo and Jocelyn for providing all of the questions. Of course, my job is to provide the answers. So let's get right to it and see. This question is very simple. It seems like it's a three-party system: normal Republicans, Democrats, and MAGA. And Jocelyn adds an observation. I think this is a really interesting observation by this listener, that from their perspective, American politics seems to be evolving, or, if I may add, Jocelyn, devolving beyond the traditional two-party framework, Democrat and Republican. I think this deserves deeper conversation, and I want to do that right now. First of all, there are only two parties in this country: Democrats and Republicans. Third parties don't work in this country. What we have, if I may be so bold as to define it this way, is a takeover of the Republican Party. That is to say that the traditional Republican Party, as we have known it since its founding in 1856, but through its reincarnations and carnations all these years, we now know that what we knew as the Republican Party no longer exists. Our goal must be to hope that the Republican Party restores itself to a better time, a better place, a more responsible Republican Party. And you ask this question: we are a mixed nation. We are proud of it. When did it change? And am I white and proud of being part of a mixed nation? This comes from one of our listeners. My answer is America is not a white nation. It's not a black nation. It's not a nation of color. The United States is a nation made up of millions and millions of diverse people. And that's what makes America great. We are a nation of immigrants, despite Stephen Miller, despite Donald Trump. And that mix of people from all over the world has produced America. And let's be clear, Ronald Reagan was right when he said that to be an American, you simply have to want to be an American. You have to live in America. You have to believe in the ideals of America. Adlai Stevenson, a Democrat, in contrast to what we're seeing now, agreed with Ronald Reagan, interestingly enough, although they didn't live or comment at the same time. What did Adlai Stevenson say in the Godkin Lectures at Harvard in 1954? He said, "The strength of America is not its military power. The strength of America is not its economic power. The strength of America is its ideas. Its ideas. The Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and of course, the document we celebrate this weekend, the Declaration of Independence. They are absolutely clear, Stevenson and Reagan, that it is the American ideal that has been so critical to all of us. And so I want to chime in on this and say that, well, this user whose tagline is "just give me the truth," you need to understand this. He says, "I really hate this strain of Democrats. It feels like some kind of operation by the right-wing deep state or something. Who'd ever think Democrats were so full of hate and total opposite of what the party always stood for. Let me answer you by saying I don't think Democrats are full of hate. I don't think Republicans are full of hate. But I do think there is a battle going on now for the soul of the Republican Party and a battle going on for the soul of the Democratic Party. Let me assure you, I am a traditional Democrat. And when I say traditional Democrat, a Democrat in the tradition of Franklin Roosevelt, Harry Truman, Adlai Stevenson, John F. Kennedy, Lyndon Johnson, a Democrat who believes in the mainstream. Now, you'll note I had to go pretty far back to identify what kind of Democrat I am. But when I was a Republican, I had to go back to find those names: Landon, Willkie, Dewey, Eisenhower, Richard Nixon, Gerald Ford. I had to go back in order to get those names out. And by the way, I include Ronald Reagan, with whom I had substantial policy differences, but was a Republican. It means that rebuilding the two-party system in America is going to be critical. Critical to all of us, because we don't have three parties in this country. I could do a history right now of third parties in the United States. I could talk about efforts by Theodore Roosevelt, Robert La Follette, George Wallace, John Anderson, Ross Perot, and those are just a few of the names who have launched third parties. But the simple truth is third parties don't have traction in this country. That's why when Ronald Reagan was asked to form a separate conservative party, he refused. And if Donald Trump were to want to create a separate MAGA party, he would fail. It simply doesn't work in America. There are only two major political parties, and therefore the battle for those two parties hinges on what we do in the future. I also want to indicate to you that I don't believe in this system of the top two running off against each other. I think it is far more important to have a Democratic primary and a Republican primary. That way, the members of those parties have the ability to choose who they want.
If you like the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the show to grow. Thank you for listening.